Hi, welcome. On this video, I want to do a follow-up. Again, I just put out a recent video by way of this trainer, John McGuigan, and with the theme of talking about, the issue related to force-free dog training. Again, talk about the physical. Get into some of this here. The physical part of it when through this type of permissive bribery-based approach, the hypocrisy of trainers who, just like McGuigan, going all day long about adversive tools, physical harm, abuse. They throw all the words around just like Zach George, no different. But if you pay attention here, and again, a lot of his videos, you'll see him out with these dogs on the long lines, lunging forward, bolting off, going after, control manifesting. And these dogs are basically almost being hung out, okay, at the end when they're, going out, full bore, and then being hung out, hitting the end of that line, that collar, the dog getting basically jolted. And talk about the physical, okay, we want to get into this whole thing about physical harm on dogs. Well, the issue here, in terms of not advocating even a dog's being put under any sort of reasonable level of control, because I'm going to get into this whole thing about change itself, but through this type of permissive bribe-based idea of things, um, you know, owners almost getting yanked and cranked off their feet. But the dog's coming up against that level of of momentum, okay, and force onto these collars. I talk about the hypocrisy of all of it. And again, if you start to really look at what's going on here, you'll see these trainers are basically are bound up, twisted up through their identity, okay, through this ideology, where it's like a radicalized type of you can't even have a normal kind of even conversation, but even defining what okay is represents abuse. Again, this is why I get in this whole thing with you look at the whole Jeff Gelman situation. There's a great illustration of how all the dog training community, the mob mentality piled on to Gelman over the rolled up towel, where the dog, was startled. Okay, and again, I talk about that whole situation, but not in the thing about defending Gelman that way. Okay, but talk about okay, what is the role of influence? Control, how it aligns through having the right conversation where it changes perception of dogs the right way. With dog coming into agreement with, okay, this whole thing about conflict, challenge, right? And but even be able to reconcile the responses or reactions of dogs properly by way of the relationship. Now, I have a video on my YouTube channel called the ice cream truck example. Go watch that. Okay. I talk about, this whole thing about, out of context in terms of depth of relationship, how we have to make sure we're reconciling the reactions properly by way of relationship. Otherwise, we have a misinterpretation. This is what happens. And then we're stuck in, just like being stuck in this type of loop effect or like a hamster spin in the wheel where we cannot ever fix the relationship. I'll talk about that as well. So here, very interesting video here because, the question is, and get this whole thing, well, is there even such a thing as, force free? Even balanced dog trainers will talk about, well, there's no such thing as force free. And there isn't. Okay, understand that. I'm going to answer that question here in this video, but the fact that again, but we have to get dialed into the reality of dogs as social animals. Okay, depth of relationship. There's certain themes here that understand that these trainers like McGuigan and others, they're totally focused on appearances. Okay, there's no depth. Okay, they do not connect dots properly, even in terms of how a dog's decision-making process is influenced and governed. And this gets in this whole blame shifting narrative. Why, dog owners get stuck into the inability to resolve a relationship problem with their dogs. Dogs get medicated. They end up being destroyed, or someone else takes the hit. Someone gets blindsided with an aggressive moment, and then it goes back to the dog gets the blame. Well, there must be something wrong with the dog. No, there's everything wrong with this permissive, bribery-based idea of things that totally ignores depth of relationship. It's not dialed in properly. It takes everything out of context, and it exploits certain relationship dynamics. Now, even the examples these trainers use don't even line up oftentimes because they don't even, they're out of context. So it becomes about the emotions, okay? It becomes about self. Understand it becomes very this is a very self-focused type of agenda. Because you get this thing about blaming dogs and euthanizing and destroying dogs as a result of unresolved behavioral issues. It's very selfish. Okay, this is driven by selfishness. And this is where, again, the value dogs hold through many of these individuals only extends as far as the ideology. Okay, that's why dogs get devalued. Very narcissistic. So here I want to talk about this because you talk about, is there such thing as force-free? No. The fact that you bring a dog into, okay, your home, into, the relationship that way, okay, you're bringing a dog under a level of control right away. Okay, through the environment, okay, through how you're interacting with the dog. You're controlling the dog, okay? So the hypocrisy of all of it. Understand immediately when you bring a dog into your life, you bring a dog under a certain level of structure and control. That's force. Okay, you want to define what force is, that's a level of force. You're bringing it in. So that's there already. So there's no such thing as force-free anything. Okay, so the fact that dogs are social animals, no different than parenting. Okay, if you're a parent, okay, parental influence. Okay, you have a level of structure and control over a child. Now you can choose to follow certain parenting styles, such as permissive. Then you're going to be, go do your research, look at the consequences of permissive parenting. You'll see it playing out in society today. Okay, look at all the problems. So, things get all twisted. Okay, understand things get all twisted. So the right parenting style is the authoritative parenting style. Authoritarian is over the top. Okay, authoritative, this is what this system of training represents. Authoritative parenting, basically. And even when you get in this whole thing about defining force, control, influence, it's like parental influence. How is parental influence established as a parent? Through how you're interacting with your child at all levels. Okay, that's basically the same thing. Okay, it's how you're engaging, how you're interacting with your child, certain moments of engagement. That's what I'm talking about. Okay, through your role, through the relationship itself. So the big theme here through the system of training is about relationship. Okay, so here I want to place on this because it's interesting. Here you have McGuigan going to be talking about, because this is the conundrum that they get into, right? Because they get challenged. He's saying, well, right here, say, is physically moving your dog force free? So he's trying to, they try to define or put their own little spin on things to try to give themselves comfort through their ideology. So, because God forbid, right, anyone questions or they go into some sort of tailspin here because they feel like they're going outside their ideological boundary zone. So it's all about convincing themselves. It's not about the reality of anything. Understand, this is all about just trying to convince themselves and others that fall into this trap that, force-free is real and that you can trust appearances the way that they're offering them up. Appearances are very deceiving. This is why people get blindsided all the time when they assume things that aren't true in terms of, within even the framework of response itself. Okay, talk about what's the source of problem in the dog training world. Go look at the top of my Facebook page, okay? I talk about the criteria. I talk about within the framework of response how these trainers are assuming that certain responses can be trusted at face value. The way they're using treats, the way they're motivating these dogs, it's inherently flawed at its core. Okay, I show that. Okay, and so here's the same type of, so let's play some of this video. So here you have McGuigan talking about this whole thing, trying to frame this up, right, to give, this a certain kind of comfort within this ideology itself.
I wanted to talk a little bit about what do we do when we actually have to move our dog. And I'm going to give you an example of that. So I saw a clip on Instagram the other day, and it was from a protest in England, and it was a peaceful protest. I don't want to get into the reasons why the woman was being arrested because she broke the law. Okay, whether you agree with the law that she broke is for the purpose of this discussion is neither here nor there.
So he's trying to line up this example of of protest and how physical force is used.
Okay, now what happened was she was a young woman. She'll have been in her 20s, and 4 police officers came round and they picked her up by a limb each at her torso. So one took a shoulder each and one took a kind of hip each or a leg each, and they lifted her. So that was 4 officers to do that, 4 cops, and then another 4 or 5 cops came in and surrounded that woman, and what they were doing was they were stopping her fellow protesters from interfering with the arrest. And peaceful protesters, what they would do is they would just lie on top of that woman and make it difficult for the...
So about peaceful protests. I mean, and this is the problem with language. People can put whatever language on. If it's a protest, okay, people are there, they're interfering in, okay, they're putting themselves in a certain environment, so there's force there, okay, whether they're sitting down, they're not wanting to get up and move, they're interfering in, so there's adversive things happening, okay, so this is where you get this whole thing. So here you're going to hear him he's trying to, you know, package this up a certain way with this protest example. But always keep in mind, when I talk about there's no such thing as force-free dog training, think about what I just said. You bring a dog into your environment under a certain level of structure and control, that's force. The way that they want to define that, right? There's influence and control happening. That's force. But when I talk about force, I get this thing about relationship. Okay? We talk about force at the physical level, right? Force, right? Control. But there's also in terms of relationship itself. I talk about defining that through how you're connecting, even in terms of your presence itself. Just your presence. When you have a certain idea of things, okay, this is what makes dogs amazing animals, social animals. You mean they can tell. This is why dog trainers get bitten before they even move, as they're starting to, as the gears are turning, and they're starting to, even before they start to avert even reasonable level of control over a dog that has a high level, has got an aggressive high, that dog will lash out, like feeling that what's about to happen before it even happens. Okay, so the relationship dynamic part is understanding when you get this thing about what defining control and force, there's depth. I even get this whole thing about hierarchy. Dr. David Meck, why he changed his position, because in terms of how that you know, in terms of dogs as social animals, you know, the dynamics, even when dogs turn their head as they're approaching each other, so one dog submitting already through depth of relationship, there already know outcomes. Right? See, this is totally lost on these trainers. They're not dialed in to certain realities as to at the social level in terms of depth of relation at all. All right. So when you hear these examples here, I keep playing some of this. You hear these examples. Always understand they're always trying to package this up to fit within their ideology. Okay, always.
The cops to move them, right? Now, I'll get to the point in a second. I was a cop for a long time, and I did...
So was I, okay, so...
I policed a lot of demonstrations when I was in uniform. I was in uniform overall from 1992 until 2007 or something like that. And I worked at Faslane at the naval base on the Clyde, where we had the peace camp, okay, and we had to arrest people during, now they're peaceful protesters, all right, which we get, and we arrested them carefully. And
now look at the language here, okay? I mean, that's a police officer. Now, he's saying, oh, well, I was a police officer, we arrested them like carefully, and he's trying to package this up. Like, pay attention to the language here. Okay, how carefully he arrested people as a police officer.
With consideration and without violence. Okay.
Without violence. So what's his definition of violence? See, this is where you get this whole thing about force, violence, right? And it's all designed or constructed, twisted to meet the ideology of however people's identities play. And Zach George is the same way. You know, the word no is violence, according to Zach George. Like, think about it. It's so twisted. Don't get me wrong, lots of people buy into this stuff. But this is why the dog training world is in the shape that it's in. Okay, understand, there's no common sense, no clarity, all confusion, right? Well, who's bringing all this confusion in? These individuals. Because it's a slippery slope. Because, you know, I talk about this, you know, when you start using this thing, well, there's more than one way to train a dog. Well, where did that saying come from? It came from the confusion from the very start.
Okay, so that's the woman had to be arrested, okay, given all the other things about whether you agree with it or not, okay, not really relevant for this discussion, but she had to be arrested. When she was arrested with the least amount of force and the most amount of consent.
Least amount, there's still force. You understand, it's just like there's no such thing as force-free dog training. You're still controlling the environment of the dog. You can get this thing about, you get using as a police officer on the force continuum, right? As a police canine officer. So, but it goes from what? It goes from verbal, right? And it goes up from there, right, to physical levels of force, right? You're guided by that, right? So, there's the force continuum, but there's still, right from the fact that you're going into, as soon as you enter someone's environment or you're make contact, okay, there's control. The fact that you have a uniform on, think about what I'm saying, because this goes into the thing that bring the dog into your, as soon as you bring a dog into your environment, the fact that you're going there under a certain role that's given authority through the government, all right, that's controlled influence, because that's how you're perceived. Okay, that's what you're given. So the fact that you just show up at a protest, you're standing as a police officer, people sitting there already know, okay, that force could be used. You're gonna, force is coming, right, into your environment. So the fact that you're, and you get into some of the, even some of the things about even in policing itself, the fact that you stop a vehicle and asking for consent, well, is it really consent given your role? Are they really giving consent? In Canada, I mean, they get right into all that too, like very, very tricky because of the fact that you're under, you stop a vehicle right away, you're bringing that control over that vehicle, over that occupants of that vehicle. So the fact you're wearing a uniform before you do anything else, right? There's, controls happening, forces happening. See, the interpretation very subjective. It's all up to the person who's interpreting, right? Same as here. McGuigan's like trying to twist all this, saying, carefully, no, there's aspects, there's a force continuum, but the fact that you're showing up there as a police officer, well, there you go.
Consideration for her person as possible. Okay. Now compare that to things that you've seen in the States where the cops would have deployed pepper spray.
Oh, here we go. I'm in the U.S. now. He lines us up as the big bad. The police in other areas are, violent.
Okay, so we just gone in and pepper sprayed them all until they moved. Okay, that's not what we do in the UK most of the time. In fact,
like a lot of police officers don't even carry, firearms, sidearms, which is crazy. You see like I'm watching some of these shows, I'm like, they're going in for like after a serial killer, like two of them, and they're not armed. I'm like, what? This is so ridiculous.
In fact, we don't, okay? Not routinely and not as a matter of policy. In the continent, in some places in Europe, the cops would have come out with water cannons and hosed them down the street.
Yeah, those terrible United States police officers. I mean, come on, give me a break.
And then arrested them.
There's a lot of times here too, when you get into this thing because you're meeting up, say, this group of protesters. All these protesters already are wearing like the gas masks, they got the shields, they have all sorts of other, things going on there where you're like, our best option, we need to use, water cannon or pepper spray. I mean, it's to prevent people from getting injured. So again, force continuum, right? Because based on common sense to say, of course, people are always going to complain no matter what amount of force is being used, even if it's within the parameters of being reasonable, right? So understand here that here he's trying to, define certain things, but he's leaving out a lot of other considerations. It's all subjective, right? Just saying, oh well, we were careful. No, the fact you're showing up there in uniform, and the fact that sometimes people just get up, they made their statement and just walk away. Hey, you got to move. Okay, they'll move. Sometimes they won't move. Then you got to lift them up, pick them up. But if you go into a protest, there's some of the protests going on lately, and people got riot. Basically, the protesters are wearing like riot gear, like they're showing up prepared, right, to have a certain encounter. So I mean, the police is going to wallow in there and start to no, you got to take you have to take certain things into consideration. It's not about using undue force here. That's not what I'm talking about, but there's just common sense.
And then in other regimes, cops would have come in and brutalised those people with a lot of violence. Okay.
So here we go, the violence, right? And don't get me wrong, there's times, treat things, situations as based on the specific thing that's happening. If there's violence, if there's unreasonable force being used, excessive force, hey, those things have to be investigated. Period. I mean, that's just how it is. But don't see, it's just like painting this wide brush over everything. That's what.
And we know what we're talking about there. Now, getting on to how that deals with our dog, okay? If I have to move him, okay, say he didn't want to go anywhere, me moving him, so he's on a harness there.
Yeah, as a police officer, I was make a point. I would never want to work with someone like John McGuigan. He's the type of guy that, again, you encounter something where, it could be a serious situation. I don't know what he'd be doing. He'd be going in his car to get a ticket book or something. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Okay, and I'm going to flip this round. Me picking the harness up here, okay, and physically moving him through space like this way, pal, like that.
So here you go. So he's saying, well, I've moving the dog up because the dog's on a body harness. So he's trying to package this up to like, okay, this is like the minimum amount of control I'm bringing on this dog. But we'll go watch his other videos. These dogs are bolting out like crazy on the end of a line over going after swans and everything else, other dogs. And they're being hung out basically, at the end of the thing. They're bolting out so fast. Just total hypocrisy. But here, the other issue here, talk about certain relational dynamics. This is where he's not dialed in. This dog could get up very quickly and start moving, saying, "Hey, I get to express control over some other dogs here in the park. Yeah, I'm highly motivated to respond and move." See, that's the thing. See, he's not dialed into any of that. So, because everything's about just, superficial. Okay, it's not about depth here at all. It's not about connecting dots properly, saying these dogs could very well, even without treats, right? Because what are you exactly? You're being toll booth, as I call it. So this dog could be moving around very quickly and saying, "Hey, look, I don't have any force," but the dog's mind's jumping ahead because they're about to bolt out, and then you're going to hang the dog out because you have no control of the dog.
Okay, is the equivalent? I know he's coming with me here. Okay, is the equivalent of what the cops did in London the other day with that woman.
It's so ridiculous.
So I am absolutely moving him through force. Okay, there is no doubt about it that I'm doing it. That is completely different from me putting a slip lead round his neck and
see, and then he goes into this choke him. Go watch the videos of these dogs. Basically, he's just rushing out. He's in parks with these dogs and stuff, trying to bribe these dogs. So total hypocrisy here.
Choking him to do it. Completely different. All right, and see if you don't know that that's different. I don't know what to say to you. Okay, I really don't. And it's different from putting a shock collar on him and
here we go, the shock collar.
Shocking him with.
So all about, see, and so here, because we get into the collateral damage of this stuff, right? You talk about the death before discomfort agenda in play here, right? People getting blindsided, bitten. But see, these trainers get on here and say basically anything they want. They feel like they're not accountable. God help him if I was to show up there and do a proper audit and hang out with him for a week. And I want to see, or put the picture to the test. I want to see just how great this ideology really works. Well, it's going to be a event. Let's put it that way. I'm looking for the right word because you can't showcase bribery. Okay, everything gets exposed. How many of these owners continue to struggle in the relationships with their dogs after, coming into agreement with this bribery-based permissive ideology? How many? See, that's the thing. So it's just like whitewashing all of it and taking these examples and trying to say that, well, force as defined through the force-free, ideology is just at the bare minimum. But there's moments you see these dogs basically getting hung out because they're bolting out on these long lines. And beyond that, how many dogs are actually, in terms of a better relationship, beyond just appearances, right? How many of these dogs are actually getting better? How many are being blame shifted on? Like all those things, let's see that. Right? That it's like, and I talk about that. Go watch my videos. I talk about just, how is the dog training world's in the shape that it's in. The collateral damage, the blame shifting on the dogs. It's like the permissive parent says, I don't understand why my child, got in a fight at school and having all these problems, right? It's called what I call displaced blame. It's like you're able to shove it off. And that's what these trainers do. They shove it off. And meanwhile, they just go on a rampage and try to, disparage and go after certain devices, control and influence, because they're exploiting everything. They're exploiting these relationship dynamics as well. They're working off people's emotions. So all something to keep in mind here. But if you talk about anyone that talks about force free, there's no such thing. As soon as you bring a dog into your environment, you bring the dog under a level of control and influence. Him trying to pack this up like the dog has a body harness on, he's moving with the dog. The dog would be highly motivated to move, to go and lunge at some other dog in the park. I mean, just at a response level, that doesn't mean anything. So it's all about how you proceed in the relationship, your role, and making sure you truly have a better relationship with your dog. Thanks for watching.